This is Anthony Parent of Parent and LLP, and thank you for joining us in part 6 of our IRS Fresh Start Program webinar. And this is penalty relief. And with me is Jillian Terrell, Michelle Wynn, Bob Lyon, Tim Pepe, and Michelle Palmieri. And we are going to talk about penalty relief and how it works with the Fresh Start Program. And Michelle Wynn, this is a little hobby of yours, isn't it? Penalty relief, right? Penalty relief is easy. You just wave a magic wand. Could you explain how it works with us still a little bit better?
Well, everybody walks into our office saying, well, can't you just have the IRS remove my penalties? I don't mind paying my taxes, but I don't want to pay penalties or interest. Well, first of all, get the IRS removing the interest from your tax liability out of your mind. It does not happen very often. We do have a blog or other webinar on the topic of when they do happen, but it's extremely rare. So for your average person, having penalty relief is something you can certainly get from the IRS in certain circumstances. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the IRS's Fresh Start program. The number one reason that people will be granted penalty relief, and it's actually the first one that the IRS even looks at, is the IRS has agreed they'll give you a sort of freebie. If you have one time that you file your tax return late or pay it late, and this is just kind of out of the blue, you have an issue, you come in, you pay your tax liability in full, and request to have the penalty removed, the IRS has said for the most part they will grant you this one-time penalty relief. You do have to be in current compliance for filing your tax returns and paying estimated tax payments if it's required. You can have other tax liabilities out there, but you must not have had any other penalties imposed for the 3 years prior to that 1 year you're asking to have the penalties removed. So if you owe for 8 years of taxes, the IRS may remove it for just that first year out of the 8 if you had filed and paid on time for the 3 years before that. This applies to most type of tax penalties, but it does not apply to any failure to pay your taxes by the EFTPS system, which is the electronic federal tax payment system for
like payroll taxes. And
it does not apply to those one-time filing requirement things like gift tax returns, estate tax returns.
3250. Probably not.
The next most common reason is a reasonable cause penalty relief. And this one is actually very, very difficult to get through because what you have to prove is that you were doing everything right, you were using care, you were taking care of all your obligations as best you were able at the time, but you were still unable to comply. Most of the time when this happens, it's due to issues like serious illness, a death in the family, something that was beyond your control that happened that stopped you from being able to file or pay your taxes. The other reason is specific statutory exceptions. This is where when Congress passed a law stating a type of penalty to be imposed, they gave reasons why it would not be imposed. The most well-known one for this is that when you mail your tax return on time to the correct address, they'll count it as filing on time even though the IRS doesn't receive it until 3 weeks after it was due. The other one is administrative waivers. The IRS makes these up as it's necessary. Basically, whenever there's a rule change, a filing requirement change, the IRS may say, we won't impose penalties on this for a specific period of time. The other one is for IRS error, which is actually kind of funny.
That happens? IRS makes an error?
On occasion, the IRS makes mistakes. I think our lives would be so much easier if it didn't, but unfortunately, it's a fact of life. Essentially, these are when penalties get removed because they never should have been there in the first place. Sometimes people will mail their tax returns or mail their extensions to the IRS and somehow it gets lost and never gets processed. And so if you get a late filing penalty and you can prove you actually filed your tax return, you filed your extension, they'll remove the late filing penalty because you can show that it was their mess up and not yours.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Now, just to recap, I mean, there's just to understand, there is no such thing as Fresh Start penalty relief. This title is a complete lie. What we're trying to say is that you just have to use a regular penalty relief mechanisms. This is Anthony Parent, Parent and Win in the resolution team. And in part 7, I believe, is next. And we're going to be talking about payroll and business tax problems. And we hope to see you there.